The 100 Line is a game I completely finished a while back, and after sinking almost 200 hours in it, I left feeling like many things were missing. Even though the game had 100 endings, only one felt truly conclusive. Going through some of the routes honestly felt like reading fanfiction. Strange scenarios that vary wildly in quality and consistency. But let's take this one at a time and I'll address each issue I have and what I think could have been done better. Spoilers ahead, of course. First, I want to talk about the prologue. It's the first thing you experience and is unchanging. You can't make any decisions in this part, and the alternate endings open up after you finish it. The prologue is what got me hooked on the game, slowly uncovering the truth of why you're defending the Academy over the 100 days. Concluding with an excellent cliffhanger of an ending made me believe I was in for something special. However, that wasn't exactly the case. The quality drops off a lot after the prologue depending on which route you end up on. There are some really good ones, but that'll depend on the choices you make. My first problem, which is admittedly more of a nitpick, is that if you pick the first two most logical choices at the start, you get sent straight into steady fundamental. There's no route where you get to pick all the right choices and blow through the 100 days using your previous knowledge, but like I said, that's more of a nitpick. I think to enjoy this game the most, you'll need to use a route guide, because after I got kicked from the SF timeline, I went back and chose some different decisions. One of these decisions was to just dodge an attack, which I did. This one inconspicuous choice puts you on the comedy route. In my case, I got the scenario where Takumi gets threatened into stealing Hiriko's panties, gets caught, and then is humiliated by some of the girls. This was the first route I got any progress in after completing the prologue. No joke, I was so annoyed, I put the game down there and came back a couple days later. The endings are a real mixed bag. There are some really enjoyable ones like in the Cult of Takumi and Ava routes. Maybe even has the best ending in the whole game, who knows. Some are downright awful, such as the ones in Multiple Atos and Conspiracy. I'm not going to rank every ending, as that would be the length of a whole other video. Let me know if you'd like to see something like that. I would say there's more good than bad, but the bad does get exhausting if you're going for all the endings. There's also so much filler in the less interesting routes. Takumi will go, and then do that for 5 days straight every so often. One thing I noticed after completing a couple routes is every time you make it to day 100, we don't get to see the characters make it to the artificial satellite, or their lives after the war. It just ends abruptly with no conclusion. Some endings don't end this way, but most do. One route in particular may have something to do with this, which I'll get to soon. There are two endings people consider to be the true endings, one of them being from the steady fundamental timeline. Spoilers ahead for SF because I'm going to have to explain a couple things. After picking the two most logical choices at the start, Hiriko will approach you about a lie you told the team. After some pestering from Takumi, we find out that Hiriko is a special little snowflake that can also manipulate time to some extent. How can she do this? Because she's good at multiple things or some stupid shit like that. It turns out that they are stuck in a time loop, and almost all the routes we've experienced so far have been a part of this loop. The loop being that we get sent back to the night of day 2 when we get to day 100 or die at some point. This is the reason most endings end abruptly, because that's when the loop resets. I shouldn't have to say this, but that kind of ruins the impact when everything just resets and we did all that for nothing. After some convincing, Takumi and Hiriko agree to team up and try to break out of the loop. This involves using a machine to jump to other timelines and screw around in them. Now this timeline really wasn't my favorite. I find the whole multiverse concept to be really annoying, and this was no exception. Plus in some parts there's Reddit humor you'd see in the comedy route, and it is completely out of place.
これからケツの穴に手突っ込んで奥歯ガタガタ言わしとるから覚悟しとけよボケ上等じゃよほんだらやれるもんならやってみ踊れのドタマかち割って脳汁チューチューすすったるわ
Hiriko is the deuteragonist of this timeline, and if you like Hiriko, you'll probably have a decent time. I don't. I think she works way better as a background character, and Takumi was especially annoying, so that didn't help. Of course, that's just personal preference. One thing I should mention is characters vary wildly between timelines. Takumi, for example, can sometimes compete with L from Death Note on cognitive ability, and other times he can be so unbelievably stupid it borders on parody. One example is when Eito intentionally gives him advice so bad it will literally get him killed, and Takumi takes it and thanks him for it. Getting back to shitting on Steady Fundamental, my number one biggest problem with it is when you meet the requirements to break the loop and get the quote-unquote best ending called All 17 of Us. You think that once you break the loop you get some epilogue showing what happens after. Instead, it ends the same way every single other loop timeline does. Just so you can better understand, I'll show you. When I first got that ending, I sat there so confused. I couldn't believe after all that I got the same non-ending as all the others. If it wasn't obvious, I'm not a fan of Steady Fundamental. They could have at least given more care to the ending, but whatever. As I said before, Steady Fundamental has one ending out of two that is considered to be the true ending. The other is from the root second scenario called Farewell Last Defense Academy, also known as the Tell-All ending. This ending doesn't have any of the problems I've talked about before. It's a direct continuation of the prologue, answers the rest of the questions, and ends in a tragic yet narratively satisfying way. It's very obviously the canon true ending. If you want to have the best experience with this game, after completing the prologue, use a guide to get Farewell Last Defense Academy, and then play the other endings as a what-if scenario. I think the most disappointing thing for me is the cliffhanger at the end of the prologue. After Takumi goes back in time, the rest of the Special Defense Unit send a message from the artificial satellite saying that there is a huge problem up there. The route covering what happens when they get back to the satellite was what I was looking forward to most. However, as I made my way through each ending, I was hit with the painful realization that there wouldn't be any follow-up. In fact, it is never mentioned again. I honestly have no clue why they decided to abandon it, but it makes the whole thing worse for it. In conclusion, despite my many problems with Last Defense Academy, I wouldn't call it bad, nor do I regret my time playing through it. It starts out very strong, but the further you get in, the more the cracks start to show. That's about all the thoughts I have regarding Last Defense Academy. A game with very good qualities bogged down by its sheer size, and ultimately, fails to meet its potential.